Well, I'm Dick Farley, and I'm from Lincoln, Nebraska. Born in 1941, and to a family that probably covers all the bases in sort of Western history. My mom is from a family of sodbusters, Danish sodbusters who showed up in southeastern Nebraska in the 1880s, and my dad is from a family that has a big chunk of Indian blood in it, Omaha Indian. My great-grandfather married into the tribe. He was sort of an Irish cowboy who showed up, a black sheep of the family showed up in Nebraska, unable to find a Catholic church, and so he showed up in the 1880s. I don't think there was much there. Met my great-grandmother, who was the daughter of the last of the Omaha chiefs, Inchtamaza was his name, or Iron Eye, and he had seen the writing on the wall for a long time and had educated his four daughters in the new culture. One daughter was educated in medicine to come back and help the tribe. One daughter, or two daughters, were educated in just sort of general liberal arts to help the tribe sort of fit in culturally, and my great-grandmother was educated in business. My dad and mom both went to University of Nebraska. My dad was a star football player, and my mom was raised in a little town and was raised in a country store. Knew the mercantile business backwards and forwards, and her later career was as a clothes buyer for a department store in Lincoln. And my dad was, he was a terrific football player, All-American in the 1920s, and played against all those great, sort of icons. Red Grange and the Four Horsemen and all those guys. And Nebraska sort of held up its end of the stick pretty well there. I think that they beat them more often than not. In order to just sort of deal with the time, I drew a lot. I sort of drew, anything a kid would draw. Tanks and airplanes and mountains and things, and listen to the radio. So I've been drawing since I've been a really small guy, and it's been kind of part of my life. When I was in sixth grade, sort of just deciding for the first time, what kind of courses was I going to take in junior high? And so I was looking down the list and saw this course called grafting, and I was interested in, as any kid would be, of putting weird things together. So grafting, that sounds really, really good. I could graft a rose bush to, a pine tree and see what I get. Of course, it turned out not to be grafting. It turned out to be drafting. In fact, I met my wife in junior high, and we didn't like each other. She thought I was pretty dopey, and I thought she was, typical girl. So we kind of, and then she went off to a different high school than I did, but we met again in university, and she was a knockout stunner at the time, and I just, oh my gosh, was, how are ya, and she, she, for some reason liked me. And her dad was a terrific architect in Lincoln, and so I worked in his office while I was going to school, and sort of absorbed absorbed stuff from him that you know, I wish I had applied better. The school, University of Nebraska, was a good, solid architectural school. Before I graduated, Sidney and I married, and she graduated the year before I did. And we were living in Lincoln, and she wanted to get out of town as much as I did. So I got a chance to work with in Ron Sims's office in Bournemouth, and obviously grabbed it as hard and fast as I could. And Sid and I went off to Bournemouth and lived there for a couple of years, and it was a wonderful period of time. Bournemouth is on the south coast of England, right along the English Channel, with the Isle of Wight across from it. Things got really cold, and we lived in cold water flats, and pushed shillings into electric meters on the wall for heat and hot water and everything like that. And so we ran out of shillings, we ran out of light, we ran out of heat, and either we had to get into bed or we had to go out, one or the other. And it was particularly difficult when you're taking a bath, when you run out of shillings. But it was a wonderful time. I earned, I think take-home pay was £5 a week. So we had a great time in England, but decided that we wouldn't stay there. We didn't feel comfortable raising kids there. Came back to United States, back to Lincoln to regroup. And then I got a chance to join Charlie Blessing's urban design group at the city of Detroit and the City Planning Commission. Charlie Blessing was planning director of Detroit. They just got a big grant for a downtown plan, and I showed up 3 weeks after the riots, and the place was still smoking. And downtown Detroit was still downtown Detroit. It had suffered from the expressways and the dispersion, but hadn't completely collapsed yet. I think if Charlie were in another place at another time, he had been fabulous. It taught me something about architects and planning, and that was that there's a time and place for the form of architecture, the form of cities to be top of the agenda. There's another time and place where the economics, the social policies are much more important. And then for Detroit at that time, dreaming of a beautiful physical future was not what it needed, not what downtown needed. So after 3 or so years, the study wrapped up, and we had a child by then, my firstborn son, and we decided that Detroit was not really our future either, and had a friend in Rochester, New York, and decided to try to get an opening into the planning office there in urban design, and there was, and we moved to Rochester, and it was an idyllic place to raise kids. The planning office was okay, but I got more and more bored with the fact that you had to somehow collect all this information about housing in order to do some sort of a study that made any sense. And it didn't feel good to me. So in 1974, I applied for a graduate program at Cornell, and it must have been a slow year because they let me in. But I was sick of urban design. I wanted to get back into architecture. Urban design to me was, and I'd seen it both in Detroit and Rochester, it was pretty limited. So I transferred into the architecture program under Matthias Ungers, who, Cornell, I suppose like a lot of schools, had camps. There was a Colin Rowe camp and there was a Matthias Ungers camp. Matthias was a German architect who was part of Team 10 and was really good in building types and creating some wonderful form it was urban design and very much in an architectural way. Graduated and came, again, looking around for a job. I was thinking about staying on the East Coast, but we were both drawn back to the West. Again, Noel Copeland, who was now with Johnson Hobson and Partners here in Denver, suggested I show up and see if I can get a job, and I did. And at the time I came, which was 1977, Jim Johnson had cycled, I think, his firm had cycled, and he was in his sort of rebuilding phase. I think he had a total of 6 partners by that time. He had Noel and Bart Smith and Bob Root, Jerry Cowley, and Dale Hobson, and himself. And I showed up as the only employee, and fresh out of school, with all these wonderful ideas, and they taught me, and it was a good firm. It was a real good firm. They worked hard to make buildings and design work all the way through. And a position opened up at the city of Denver as sort of director of urban design. It was a time when Denver was really sort of investing in itself. Things were pretty flat, but the citizens were willing to vote for bond issues. And then at the time that was happening, the valley was kind of opening up. The 1991 plan under Frank Gray envisioned the transportation transit hub at Union Station. We worked over that quite a bit. I did design standards and guidelines for development around the Union Station at the time, long time ago. And then Stapleton, Federico Pina had managed to move Stapleton to DIA. And so Stapleton opened up as a big planning opportunity. Lowry Air Force Base was decommissioned and given back to both the city of Denver and then Aurora. That was being planned at the time, and I had my fingers in both of those, and I was really happy about that. Generally, we had good urban design consultants, and so we have good ones, and I just simply support them. I try to stay out of the way and support them wherever I can. Around 1995 or so, 95, 96, I began to feel that maybe, you tend to wear out your welcome at some places. You feel that maybe the real value that you have to bring to something is who you know and how to get through the process, and that's not a real value. That doesn't bring anything to the table. So I decided to move on, and also at the same time discovered that I could actually retire. Take early retirement. I decided to leave, and then one of my cohorts there said, "Well, Dick, do you know a rule of 55? You know about that?" I said, "No, I never heard of it." I said, "Well, check into it." And so, in fact, I could retire, which with very little money, but with health insurance, and that has been a godsend. I've been keeping notebooks for probably 20 years, and I really encourage young architects, designers, urban designers to keep notebooks, to learn how to sketch and to use them as field notes. My notebooks are full of street cross sections, buildings, building types, plazas, park designs, all over the world. And I think drawing and sketching for me is just such a great pleasure in and of itself. It's not that I'm trying to somehow create some great lovely thing. It's just that I just love to draw. I think John Ruskin said something to that effect. It was just he just drew. And he absorbed stuff. And when you draw, you absorb. When you take a photograph, or at least when I take a photograph, you store, but you don't absorb. And then the notebooks are full of journals. You write stuff down. They're scrapbooks. You sort of paste things in, photographs or whatever, things you run across in books, musings to yourself, kind of grumblings or bitching, all that sort of stuff. You write off some, you're really angry and you write something down in your notebook and sort of, well, don't read that, but they are, they should be a sort of a cross section of your thinking and your appreciation of architecture and urban design. So the notebooks are really they're sort of like time capsules. I go back through them and realize, well, there's a thread that I should sort of take up again, and there's an interesting thought I hadn't seen for a long time, and it's I think it's still translatable even in this digital age. I sort of cringe at all of the new programs that are coming out that emulate drawing. You can sort of draw on a pad, and you can sort of email it to somebody. And but I love that interface between pen, pencil, and paper. And that's what printmaking is so beautiful for me. You get this wonderful translation of something into a print. Well, I think advice to young architects or designers, for me, would be to get out and observe. Get out and observe. Use the city as your, your school. Learn from stuff that works. I'm sort of uneasy about new urbanism, but I'm a big believer in context. I think architects should create buildings that work together in order to create something bigger and better. And I don't see that in architecture these days. I see sustainability, which is all about making the building systems, work with minimum energy. But I don't see architects really looking at their building as a player in amongst other buildings to create places and spaces. And to me, there's too much emphasis on originality and novelty. There's not enough emphasis on making things fit together and solidity and humility. Having a well-built background building would be terrifically refreshing for me, as opposed to something that you can hear it beating its chest miles away. When I moved downtown, I bought a little press and have a little studio and continue to do printmaking, and I hope to, sort of segue into that more and more as don't think I'm going to retire out of urban design, but if I can somehow find a balance between the art and the urban design, that's kind of what I'm looking for. And I love living downtown. Living downtown is just wonderful, and downtown has turned into I think one of the best downtowns in the country. I would say it's, if you rule out Chicago, I think it's frankly, I think it's better than Minneapolis. And there's nothing to compare to it, I don't think, between the coasts, if you take Chicago out of the equation. I'm very proud of having been, you know, one of the cast of thousands that have helped produce that.